You're listening to the Nonprofit State of Minds podcast, an Angel Oak Creative production.
Hey everybody, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Welcome back to our podcast, Nonprofit State of Minds, where we pick the brains of nonprofit leaders and just try to learn more about how we can serve this sector better and to be more successful. We've had some great guests in the past, and today is no exception. We have Ivan Canada, CEO and President of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. Welcome, Ivan.
Thanks for having me, David. It's an honor to be here this morning.
Well, we appreciate it. And I know you've been drinking from the fire hose as you've gotten into the new role there. And it's been about 9 months, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I started it in March. Yep.
Well, welcome aboard, and you're still there, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, I'm still here and enjoying it, even on the difficult times, right? You know, that is a part of leadership, and so I'm excited to be here. It's an honor to be in this job, so it all makes it worth it.
Well, thank you. Most of our clients are in North Carolina, and we do have a few outside, but you know, it's the North Carolina nonprofit sector. You know, I've always been, I always feel like we're one of the best, and maybe that's a little, you know, a little pride there. But you know, I feel like you all are one of the reasons for that. The center. If you would just talk a little bit about what the center does, and then maybe share a little bit of your journey to this particular role.
Yeah, absolutely. So in essence, you know, the center is, I like to look at us as a convener, a hub for the sector, nonprofit sector in North Carolina. And so we are, in essence, a membership organization, but we operate, I think, a little bit more expansively than just a traditional membership organization, because we are working on behalf of the entire nonprofit sector, whether or not people are members or not. And so membership is open for any 501c3 nonprofit operating in North Carolina and groups applying for that status. And we've got about 1,100 members that represent all sizes and types of nonprofits. And we're really fortunate when we say we cover North Carolina. We've got membership in about 93 of the 100 counties that exist in North Carolina. So we're really proud about that. And, you know, in essence, we are an information center on effective organizational practices. We're a statewide network for nonprofit board and staff members and those who support the sector. And then lastly, an advocate for the nonprofit sector as a whole. And so it is a really large and complex organization. And I'm honored to be serving as the third leader of the organization in its 35-year history. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about sort of what the center is and how we operate high level.
Is your top priority getting those other 7 counties?
It's a priority. I don't know if I would say that it's a top priority. I mean, you know, I think one of the things we think about, right? Like, I think people forget that we have North Carolina is really expansive in terms of, you know, how far and wide and everything it is. And so some of those counties, as we know, right, are really small. And so one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we are bringing folks in that are finding value, right, with the center. So obviously, of course, yes, we would like to one day be able to say 100 counties that are all covered.
That would drive me nuts. I'm like, we got to get those.
Right. You'd go set up shop and start figuring out where's the nonprofit here. You take the list and begin to start knocking on doors.
Show up and knock on their door and say, we're going to give you an honorary membership.
Exactly. That's probably not a bad funder idea, right? I could go to a funder in some of those counties that cover and say, we need to get more people here. That's a good idea, David.
That's right. Well, tell us about your journey to the nonprofit world. What's that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine mine is similar to a lot of people, that if you had asked me when I was in high school or college if this is where I would have been, I would have said no. And so I had sort of different journey. I started in corporate work before I found my way to the nonprofit sector. I've always been connected to nonprofits. When I was growing up, I grew up in Greensboro, and was a part of community organizations and things like that. And so sort of community building and making change has always been really a part of who I am. And it took me a little bit of time to find my way here professionally, but that was at this point probably about 15 years ago. And I had been serving on a couple of boards at the time, and one of the organizations, the Guilford Green Foundation in Greensboro, which is a local LGBT community foundation. So we would sort of raise money and support LGBT initiatives in Guilford County and the surrounding areas. Our executive was leaving. And so a lot of folks on the board were like, Ivan, you can do this. And I was at the point that I was beginning to, I think, sort of toy with the fact of I was probably going to make that switch. And so I said, I didn't know if I was interested to do it for the long haul, but I would do it for a couple of years to sort of help.
Last words.
Right. Famous last words. I will say I didn't stay long. So I was only there for about 1.5 to 2 years. But it did begin to open up the possibilities of this being a place that I could be and work professionally for the rest of my career. And so I left Guilford Green Foundation and then went to North Carolina for Community and Justice, NCCJ in Greensboro, and served as the executive director there for almost 10 years. I did about a year in a number 2 spot with my predecessor at the time. And again, famous last words. I said, I'll do this for a couple of years. And she ended up about a year into me being there. And she came to me and she said, I'm going to be leaving. And she said, I have told the executive committee that you would be a strong candidate for the interim, and you just need to decide if you're going to apply for the job. And so, you have to be really careful what you say you're going to do, because that's not always how plans work. But so this is my third leadership role in an organization. And have served on countless boards over the years. And so I have really, I feel like, found my home of where I'm supposed to be professionally. Yeah. It allows me to use a lot of my sort of business analytical sort of, business skill set, but do it in a way that is creating good in communities and working for some different reasons other than just sort of like, increasing profits and things like that. I'm working with great folks that get to change communities and are working to make our communities better. So,
well, that's great. Well, all those unexpected twists and turns of our journeys, right?
Exactly.
In the 9 months that you've been there, what are have you had some aha moments about nonprofits in general, or maybe nonprofits in North Carolina, the sector here? Anything that maybe has surprised you, or maybe things that have been affirmed that you thought were true?
Yeah, I would say, so I was on the board of the center for 6 years before I came into this role. So I was really fortunate to be able to have a little bit of a connection to nonprofits across the state during my board years. Yeah. And so a lot of things have been affirmed really for me that I already knew, right? Like I already knew this was a really resilient sector. I already knew that it's made up of folks that are really bright, that they're caring, they're passionate about the work they want to do, right? And that there's, I think, a really great sort of ecosystem that exists to support the nonprofit sector here, right? Whether that is philanthropy, whether that's business, government, whether that is consultants, right? Like I think we've always known, and you alluded to this when we started the podcast, right? That you and I both believe that we have a really like strong and unique sector here. And we might be a little biased, but that is true. But, some of the challenges and things that have been sort of discovered or that we are talking about since I've been here, obviously, the Western North Carolina recovery has been something that I wasn't expecting when I came into this role that I would sort of be thinking about and would be sort of on an agenda, but that's there. We're seeing, as many folks have seen, the decline in individual giving and volunteering to organizations, and what does that mean? I think we'd also be remiss if we didn't talk about what's happening in sort of the larger world at this moment, of like that folks are, sort of unsure of what the future holds. We've got some divisiveness in communities, and how do we also keep nonprofits focused on the good of communities at this time, right? And so how nonprofits are a place that we can come together to bring good in communities. We're starting to see things like the ARPA funding and those sorts of things that happened during COVID dry up, as well as, the start, I think, also of a lot of things that COVID began to sort of like lay out for us within the sector. Think about like, what does that mean for long-term sort of change in that? We've got, sort of talent issues around keeping folks in the sector. And what does that look like to also retain and bring in new folks and attract them to the sector? And then lastly, the thing I think about a lot is being in nonprofits is hard any other time. And then if you take what nonprofits have sort of gone through over the past, 4 or 5 years, we think about COVID, the start of that, and to where we are today. Nonprofit leaders and team members are burned out. I mean, they're, sort of tired. They're still committed, right? But it's like, how hard can the work continue to be? And so I think those are things, right, that I, sitting in this really unique spot at the center, want to be always sort of front of mind, because I think I want the center to be able to think about, like, how are we and I able to pull the right people together and be in partnership and in collaboration with folks to really begin to wrestle and move some of these really big structural things that are going on in the sector. And so I think, while we've got all this stuff that's happening, there's a lot of bright spots and opportunities, right? I mean, obviously the fact there's a new leader at the center, right? Like, new leadership brings opportunities for organizations. And so, I'm a very different leader that the center's had in the past. And so I've been at very unique type of organizations that I think, if I think about my experience of what it was like being a young leader in the sector, some of that thinking is some of the thinking that's going to be needed for us to think about new, innovative and collaborative ways to get ourselves out of that. I think we've got an opportunity to tell the story of the sector in a different way, and begin to sort of, what is it like for us to change some sort of mental models that we have and have had about the sector. I also think that it's really ripe for partnership and collaboration in this moment. I think we realize all that stuff that I sort of listed of what's been sort of seen and explored, like the center alone can't do that. Angel Oak can't do that. Government can't do that alone. And so I think that, we've seen how we've been able to come together through COVID and some other sort of challenging times, right, as a state and across the state in various communities. And so I think we've got a roadmap to do that. And so I think I'm really excited of where, some of the relationships and the way that, many people have viewed the center over the years, right? As you alluded to again at the beginning, that the center plays an important role in the ecosystem of nonprofits. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Love it. A lot to unpack there. I don't know where to start. I think to your point, the opportunities that we have within North Carolina, I've always felt like, and this is not a slight on anybody with the center or anywhere along the way, but I've always felt like there's been really great opportunity for growth within the center, right? That, I think you said you had 1,100 members or so at this time, I think, and I think there's 40,000 or something nonprofits in North Carolina, right? So and I know not all of those are operating and things like that, but I do feel like that there is an opportunity to reach those other 7 counties and also to deepen that relationship. I guess talk a little bit about what is the value, or what can people expect if they're not a member. What can they expect of becoming a member? What should a board or a nonprofit leader consider when they're thinking about joining the the NC Center for Nonprofits?
Yeah, that's a really great question, David. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is important for people to remember is, you know, we are a nonprofit just like them.
Yeah.
And so the challenges that they may be facing, the center has also dealt with them or is currently in the process of dealing
Right.
with them, right? And so there's a sense of familiarity with that, right? So like the fact that like we're not a corporation that is doing this, we are a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So our folks that work in this organization get that, and can be really great partners to them. In that we also, I think, are building community. And I
Yeah.
think that's really important. I think about things like our statewide conference that we do every year. I have plans that I would like for us to continue to grow that and for that to evolve. I mean, I think in this time when this work is really hard, that being in community with people that get the work you do, and can build relationships that may foster somebody saying, hey, we're going to collaborate and do this program together, or hey, this is a funder that you need to meet. Those sorts of things, we need more opportunities for that to be happening across the state. And so the center is able to do that kind of work. We've also got sort of tangible benefits of things for organizations, right, around like money saving partnerships, for organizations around things that they may value, things like having pro bono support. So we've got some volunteers that volunteer their time to be able to help a nonprofit with an HR challenge they may be facing.
I've taken a few of those calls.
Have you? Well, thank you for that, David. On behalf of
I love that. I love those conversations. They're so great to to feel like we're contributing in that way. So thank you for that.
Well, you are contributing. Yes, you are.
I get the email from your team, and I'm always like, yes, here, yeah, so we've enjoyed the relationship. We've been part of NC Center now for almost 12 years, I think.
Okay.
The beginning of Angel Oak. So, our experience has been really great. This year's conference was, probably one of the best attended, I think, at least in a number of years. And
I think so, definitely since COVID, right?
Yeah, and it's just great to see people come together and work towards making North Carolina better, right? And
Right.
I as someone who grew up here and just loves the state and appreciates the work that we do. We were just up in Western North Carolina this weekend,
Okay.
and Lansing is one of the small towns that was hit pretty hard, and they were having a fundraising event, and my wife and our friends that we were up there with went and volunteered. And just the camaraderie of everyone that was there and coming together, and they weren't and some of these people lost their homes, they lost their businesses, but they were all working together to help each other, right? And I feel like that's the spirit of what the center is all about too, right? We're probably not at any given time or all of us meeting all the goals that we want to meet, but that together we can overcome the challenges and we can create new opportunities, right? So,
Right.
Sorry,
Exactly.
I'm getting on my soapbox, but
no, not at all. I appreciate you saying that, and thanks for the partnership that you all and Angel Oak have done for the past 12 years or so. And I think I'd also be remiss if I didn't talk about, like, when we think about the center, one of the things that many people talk about and mention, right, is our public policy work.
Yeah.
And so I think, in this age that where we are, I think that's a really important aspect that, a lot of nonprofits don't have the opportunity, right, that they're sort of following and thinking about what is happening in Raleigh or what's happening in Washington, D.C. that may be impacting the way that they go about doing their work. And so they shouldn't have to, right? Like they need to have their head down, focused on, solving, food insecurity in their community, focusing on providing arts in their community, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the center, right, like gets to be and play a role that we are looking to advocate for nonprofits and to protect their interests when it comes to those sorts of decisions. And so, we are really fortunate to have David Heinen, who's been with us for close to 20 years.
Wow.
At the center. And, David is, I like to say, David is a rock star when it comes to this. I can't go anywhere without people asking, you work with David Heinen? And I was like, yes, I work with David Heinen. But it is because he's been such a force. And I think, many people forget When we look at things like the fact that nonprofits pay no sales tax, right? That is because of our tax status. And
Yeah.
we have in many years, many of these state associations that exist around the country, right? Some of them were started because of the fact that there were legislatures in various states that were wanting to begin to take away the fact that nonprofits sort of benefited from not paying sales tax. And
Yeah.
so, things like the fact that many things that happen in the for nonprofits, I think we take for granted that it happens.
Yeah.
And so the work of the center is to constantly protect those sorts of things and to look out for where there may be ways that nonprofits are being disenfranchised or maybe sort of forgotten about when it comes to public policy.
Yeah. I
And
think I
so,
got David's email this morning, and
yes,
I think I think it's Policy Watch. Is that right?
yes, yes.
And yeah, I encourage people to read it. It isn't the most exciting email to read. It gets a little
It
long.
is it is digestible and it is accessible. He is
It
not
is.
speaking in
It is.
legalese, right?
But
So
it's great information that if you don't read it, you would never know it was going on. I mean,
absolutely not.
yeah, because it's not I mean, it's not going to be in the news, right? It's not going to be, I mean, nobody else is going to be reporting that except you guys. So, and yeah, I definitely encourage folks to, if you haven't subscribed to that, to definitely subscribe to that email
Yes.
and take a look at it. You mentioned some things about, going into this next year, what will be your second year of serving in your role. What are the priorities for that? Just kind of the top two or three things that you really want to see come to fruition.
Yeah, I think at this point, so much of our work is still really going to be focused on continuing to just live our mission. I think that may evolve some, right? So if we think about what does it mean to connect and educate and advocate for the nonprofit sector,
Yeah.
and I think that will evolve based off of the fact that we've got nonprofits and members that are based in Western North Carolina. And what does it mean to support organizations that are in a recovery area? What does it also mean to support the rest of the state through some of the challenges and stuff that we talked about earlier? But for me, I'm still doing a lot of connecting with members, with leaders, with foundation partners, and folks within the nonprofit ecosystem. And I think that will always sort of be a priority for me in this role because I think it's really important to have that sort of connection and for folks to feel that there is a two-way relationship that exists between the center and the rest of the ecosystem. And so,
Yeah.
I think right now in the moment, so when we look at 2025, the center is going to be celebrating its 35th anniversary
Oh, congratulations.
next fall. And so, obviously that's an opportunity for us to sort of celebrate and also look to the future
Yeah.
of that. And so ideally, I would like to use that anniversary as an opportunity for us to really begin to do some far and wide strategic planning and visioning for the nonprofit sector with our members, with the sector at large, and begin to think about what are some of the things that we want to focus on over these next, 5-7 years. I have a love-hate relationship with strategic plans because of the fact that I think if you had a strategic plan before 2020, you realize you had to sort of throw a lot of that out or put it on hold. And so I think we've got to think about what is the change we want to see and the vision that we want to see in the sector. And then what are the ways, right, that the center can begin to align our programs and our work in support of a couple of key areas that we want to drive within the sector. And so I think that our anniversary will provide an opportunity for us to begin that work. And then in the short term, up until then, we've got a new association health plan that will be launching January 1 of 2025. And so
that's exciting.
This is probably one of our most, requested member benefits. I know I've always asked, why can't the center have sort of a group health plan? And so some things have changed recently this year. And so now we'll be able to offer that. And so we'll be focusing a lot on getting that up and running and getting organizations into that, which will in essence provide sort of a single employer, right, to pool nonprofit organizations together to get pricing for that pool of employees. And then each organization would still be able to choose what plans and sort of coverage that they're providing within their own
that's great.
organization. So,
Well,
more to come
congratulations
on
on
that.
making that happen.
Yes, exactly. So I'd like to say I can't take full credit for that, but it is happening in my first
Sure.
year. So I'll take the pluses and the minuses of that. I think the two big things. So looking at exploring fractional back-end office support. So one of the things that I think we're going to see for our sectors that we're going to have to start working a little bit more in collaboration and thinking about how we can sort of consolidate some things, because we know
that's interesting.
Funding is beginning to, funding, there's never going to be enough philanthropic dollars to support all of the work that is happening. And so I think this is the beginning stages of thinking about organizations that may be able to think about fractional finance support, think about that and run that through the center, whether that's HR or IT or those sorts of things. And so we're in the early stages of beginning to look at what would a business model look like for that. And we're doing those conversations now. So that is also something. And then I think that a really big one that I think is going to be really critical to the long-term sustainability of the center is changing the way we go about doing our work. And what I mean by that is, getting the center outside of the traditional places that we've always been, which for a lot of people, they would say would be Raleigh. That the center, because they've been based in Raleigh, I think there's an assumption that all the staff live in Raleigh, which is not true. We've got staff that's in Raleigh, we've got folks in the Triad, and then we've got some folks in the Charlotte area. And so I think helping, sort of tear down that sort of old trope that we are only a Raleigh organization, but the fact that we cover the state. And so that means we have to show up in places also outside of Raleigh. And so that looks like being partners and doing tabling at various events, having folks from our membership team or our program team go to events across the state with some of our partners. And so doing that, I also think centering and connecting with our members, recognizing the members are the heartbeat of this organization. And so what does that mean to take care of members and provide excellent customer service for them? Also to make sure that members have voice in the work of the center, and to make sure that we are listening to that voice. And then I would say as part of changing the way we do about our work is how the center is able to be a convener. We sit in a very unique position as an organization to be able to pull people together, not in an essence of saying the center has the solutions, right? But being able to think about who are the folks that maybe could be brought together to think about and strategize on something, and then maybe provide some of the back support to be able to help move something forward. And so I'm excited for us to begin to do a little bit more of that. And then lastly, what that looks like is partnering deeply with philanthropy, businesses, government, and communities across the state that are wanting to do work to support the nonprofit sector.
Wow. So just little small things. You're not
little small things, right?
Ambitious goals here. So that's well, good. Well, we look forward to seeing that and being able to support any of those things. So so glad that there's people thinking about that for our sector. One of the things I noticed, especially at the events at the annual conference, the diversity of across all factors, right? From political thought to race to gender, all of those things, right, are so well represented in the center membership. And and what I think I like most about it is that it's very organic, right? I don't think that you've gone out and tried to recruit a lot, right? But it's really just happened. And and I appreciate that, because I think that it it demonstrates that we can all work together, right? That we all can, even though we may not be working on the same causes specifically, that we are just trying to make North Carolina better, right? And that gives me hope that
Well, I
that
mean,
it's possible, right?
I think if we boil it down to, sort of simple terms, I mean, if we think about why people want to be at the conference or why people want to join as members, it is because, right, like they recognize like we exist in this nonprofit ecosystem. And so
Yeah,
these are my people. And so
yeah,
that because our sector is really diverse in terms of the issues we work on, the, identities that people hold, locations across the state, whatever, right? Like that's still your community.
yeah.
And so that's the thing, right, that begins to bond and, bring us together. And so, yeah, it's something that I think for me is a really unique and special thing about this. I reminded our team right before the conference this year. I said, look, it doesn't need to be a perfect conference, right? Like the fact that we are holding space and giving people an opportunity to be together, for them to like learn something that they might take back to their organizations, for them to get a break from the day to day and like maybe begin to think a little bit strategically for a day for their organization, or just to not have some of the demands that have been put on them during that time that they're at the conference, that we are doing an important role in our sector of creating that community and space for them. So it is something that is a gift to be able to provide and offer to the sector that I love. So,
And I've been to a lot of conferences over my 25 years in marketing and all, and it that's one of the things that really just stood out to me was just we've got every walk of life, I mean, literally what I think would be kind of every race, creed, color, religion, all of those things, right?
yeah.
So it's really inspiring to see all those people come together for a common cause and to work together. Yeah, I felt bad this year at this conference because I was manning the table for Angel Oak and I wasn't able to get there the first day, and you all did the scavenger hunt, and like everybody came to our table the second day because we were like the weak link. We were, they're like, we got to get you on here to finish our scavenger hunt. And I'm like, I didn't even think about the repercussions of the scavenger hunt and not being there. So, but that was even a great tool. We got to meet so many people just because they came by the table and wanted to fill out their scavenger hunt. So
Oh, wonderful.
kudos to your team for that. Well, Ivan, thank you so much for your time today. Any kind of last thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience? Most of our listeners are nonprofit leaders, nonprofit, executive directors, development directors. Anything you'd like to leave with them?
I would say this. I think first and foremost, this thank you for the work that you do day in and day out in the conditions in which you do them in. You serve a really important role in communities, and so just thank you for that. I would say the other thing I would say would be, if folks have ideas or they want to be more deeply connected to the center, to please reach out. You can find the center online relatively easy. ncnonprofits.org is the website. All of our staff is listed on there, and you can contact staff members, including me. And so, we recognize we can't do this work alone. And so we really want to be a space that people feel that they can come to, that they can be a part of, and help be a part of making our sector like better. I mean, it's not just the center's right responsibility to
That's
do
right.
that. It is all of us. And so I think so many times, when we want to see change, we always think, well, someone else needs to do that. And like, really the change has to start with ourselves of like, what are we going to do? How are we going to show up differently? What can we do in our organization? Or what is a step that I can take? And I
Yeah.
hope that people can see, as the center evolves and changes and grows, that like this will be a space for them to be able to do that, and that we really want to be in community with the sector. And so please reach out. And then, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if you are not a current member or business sustainer or connected to the center, that you begin to build a relationship and work in that direction of being that, because we need a large and robust sector and thriving sector to be able to do all the great work that is happening across the state.
The louder the voice, the more likely it's to be
Absolutely.
heard, right? So
Absolutely. Yes. I'm sure David would love to be able to say, right, we've got 5,000 members across the state.
right.
You
That's
know,
right.
and
Yes.
so that means that our elected officials and folks listen in a different way when we've got a lot of sort of voice behind us as well. But even if folks aren't members, they need to know that we are still advocating for them and the work they do every single day.
Well, and thank you for that, Ivan, and thank you for NC Center for all you do for our community. Encourage folks to learn more about that, ncnonprofits.org. Is that right?
Yep. Yep.
And certainly check out some of our previous podcast episodes where I think Ivan, you may be our first episode for the third season next year. So we should be coming out, or you'll be the last one for this season. It just depends on whether we could get it out in time. But either way, it'll be a great listen, and encourage folks to check out our other episodes. And if you want to learn more about Angel Oak, it's just angeloakcreative.com. So thank you, Ivan, for all your time, and look forward to staying in touch and seeing the NC Center for Nonprofits continue to grow and do great work.
Well, thank you, David, for allowing me the opportunity to be on here this morning, and for the partnership that you all have had, and I know we'll continue to have.
Well, thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, David.